Good morning. Great to be here. I'm Marianne Halford. I'm from FTI Consulting. And I actually come to consulting from having been an operator in the television business. So it's just very exciting to be here with so many wonderful and terrific people. But just before we start talking with our esteemed colleagues here, how many of you have watched Orange is the New Black already? How many have finished it? Oh, wow. Okay. How many of you typically now watch television on a device other than your television set? Okay. So these are the challenges of the new world that we live in. And we have a great balance of people here to talk about it today. We have somebody who comes from the platform side, somebody who comes from the programming service side, and we have somebody who comes from the content production side. So let me start and let them all introduce themselves, talk briefly about what they do and how they are involved in the new world of content distribution. Adam Pincus.
Hi, I'm Adam Pincus. I oversee programming and production for Group M Entertainment North America, and we're effectively a co-financer and co-producer of programming on digital platforms and on television platforms. We tend to work first with the program providers. We work with the broadcast networks, we work with the digital providers, and we then find programming to invest in and co-produce with them for distribution on all platforms.
Rob Sussman.
Hello, nice to be here. Rob Sussman with Epix. I am the general manager of business operations and development and strategy. We're a 5-year-old television network, premium television network. We're owned by a joint venture of MGM, Paramount, Lionsgate, and Viacom. So we get some really big movies. And my job is to secure distribution on multiple platforms, traditional platforms, cable, telco, satellite, but also our SVOD partners, and then also our TV Everywhere device partners. And then once we get that distribution, it's my job to manage those relationships and partnerships and products.
And then Himesh Bisay, who is on the platform side of the equation. Actually, Rob, you sell to Himesh, don't you?
I'm trying.
Okay. Can we get a deal done here today?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Himesh. I'm with Comcast Cable, and I lead a team that's responsible for incubating and operating new services, new platforms for the company, extending our current product lines in video, voice, data, advertising, and building new capabilities for the company, whether that's in new content, new cloud-based services, new advertising platforms, et cetera. And actually, to get this thing going, I kind of plotted with Marianne a little bit before the panel. It's labeled kind of digital, right? Content in a digital world. And typically, when one thinks of digital, what's really happening is you have this mental model of legacy versus new, and kind of the legacy content distribution model kind of conjures up images of staid, old set-top boxes that are hard to navigate, that are slow to respond. And we kind of think digital, and we think about highly responsive, huge capacity, internet-based platforms. But what if both those worlds kind of walked across the room, shook hands, and had a party? I think you would have a platform that looks something like the X1. Mm-hmm. And I figured, take this opportunity to kind of show a short clip about what that world could look like.
TV is changing. The way you watch it should change too. Now you can turn to the cloud for whatever you want to watch, an entertainment operating system for your home. It's called X1. Whether you want to watch the newest episode of your favorite show or your team's playoff game, the X1 makes it easier than ever to find what you want. X1 tracks what you watch. It gives you personalized recommendations based on the programs you love. Record, watch, and buy content all from the same screen. Use voice recognition to search for shows.
Parks and Recreation.
Find movies you actually want to watch. Never miss out on the programs that everyone is talking about. You can stay connected to every game regardless of what you're watching. and it's based in the cloud, so the X1 updates in real time when a new feature is available. But TV isn't just for the living room. You can watch shows and movies on your tablets and phones, at home and on the go. The Xfinity TV app lets you stream virtually every channel live on a phone or tablet throughout your Wi-Fi connected home. It can also stream on-demand and saved programming too. The X1 lives beyond the walls of your house. Download your DVR programs to your device, letting you watch even without Wi-Fi. All it takes is one touch. You expect more from your television. You want quick access and the flexibility to watch your favorite programming on your own terms, in more places, and on more devices. X1 puts the power back in your hands. It's fast, intuitive, and transforming the way you watch TV. And it's only from Comcast.
So, highly responsive, intuitive, graphical interface, pulls together TV and other devices. So I guess my comment or the context I'd like to provide is when we talk about digital, let's not forget the TV set.
Okay. Well, as a Time Warner subscriber, the merger can't happen soon enough, okay? So, I hope there's nobody from the Justice Department here. I'd like to talk about the consumer, okay? And how is changing consumption patterns really changing the world of distribution? Because at the end of the day, content is a product that's being delivered to a consumer. So from your jobs, from the perches that you look at things, how are these changing consumption patterns affecting and impacting how you do your work?
Well, I would say, and this is an obvious observation, but I think that the on-demand experience is now the experience that everyone expects. And what's amazing to me, because it's still very relevant, is that the network schedule still works. The idea of a linear grid with a lead-in and the way that that impacts the popularity of a show, especially a new show, still works. So those two things sort of are coexisting right now. And I think with respect to how they affect our business, I'm not exactly sure. I think that when we think about what content to back, what content's going to be popular or successful, we're not thinking about just going to broadcast networks or thinking about that feels like a cable show. We're thinking about this is a show for a certain kind of audience, and where do you find that audience? Maybe that's the most important thing.
I mean, because apparently Genji Cohan tried to get Orange is the New Black sold to a number of networks for a number of years, couldn't get it sold, and wound up finding Netflix as a ready buyer, and it's been a huge success for Netflix. Okay, are there shows that you're developing right now where you're thinking more that this will be better for Netflix or this would be better for Amazon versus? I mean,
it's interesting that you mentioned that. So there are certain kinds of genres of programming that I think in a sort of traditional sense would be deemed that's not a popular type of program.
Right.
And I think that the difference that might exist today is that binge viewing and primarily enabled by OTTs and the VOD experience might suggest that genres of programming that haven't been popular for a while, like I'll just mention the anthology, for instance. Now, the anthology is possibly poised to have a totally new life. So yeah, we are working in that space a little bit because we think while I don't think you could sell an anthology to a linear broadcaster easily today, you might be able to say, with the right auspice, in the right genre, with the right packaging, with the right umbrella idea, you could find an audience that would graze their way through it, and if they liked it, they would consume more of it, and since it would all be available to them at one time, that might change that, the appeal of that type of programming. So yeah, I think it does affect how we think.
Cool. And Rob?
The technology has been a real boon to our business from a consumption standpoint. The technology, if you think back to the premium business, this is premium and subscription business. If you think back, HBO, Showtime 20 years ago had one feed. Yeah. And then they added a couple of other plexes, and then they had 10 or 20 plexes, and that was to give consumers more choice. And then you had some video on demand, and then you had 100 titles on demand on a set-top box. And now you have a company like Epix, where we have 3,000 movies available across all of our devices, Xbox, PlayStation. So the consumption has been driven up dramatically, so it makes us more valuable. And I think that's why there are 4 premium networks right now that are all thriving and thriving in the space, and Hulu and Netflix and Amazon. I think it's just been, it's a great consumer experience. It's easy to watch, so you watch more of it.
But what are you learning about the consumer in terms of content preferences or how they're watching it, when they're watching it? Are they doing more on the Xbox or more on television? Or are there things that you're learning based on what the data is telling you?
The majority of our viewing on devices is still connected to TV sets. So it's coming from the game consoles primarily, so Xbox and PlayStation. And then Blu-ray players behind that, and Roku is very strong as well. So people still want to watch on the big screen, but they'll watch on these devices. But because there's a device that requires you to know, where your second remote is and find your A/B switch or your input button, it skews younger. Right. So what we're finding is that the average age of what used to be a premium television customer had been aging up. We're actually aging down, so we're probably 10 years younger than HBO and Showtime in terms of our demos.
Right. Well, obviously HBO is chasing the younger demo in terms of a number of the programs that it's been producing. Are you going to be yourselves looking at trying to cater to that audience as well, and doing some things more on the original side ultimately?
Yeah, we're definitely going to make a push into original programming. I think our movies have been skewing that way as well, with a lot of the product we've been getting from Paramount and from particularly Lionsgate.
Right.
With the Hunger Games franchise has really moved us down that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's just an incredibly fun time to be in the video business, and an incredibly interesting time. I mean, some of the consumer trends that we're seeing is, I kind of bucket it all under this whole diversification of viewership, right? I mean, we often refer to it as a multi-platform, but I think it's so much more than that, because clearly consumers are viewing on multiple devices, right? We're kind of all seeing that across our platforms. They're time shifting a lot more, and that's just not DVR, it's on VOD and kind of TV everywhere platforms and OTT platforms as well. All of that is enabling that. And then we're also seeing this tremendous diversification of the kind of content consumers are being able to watch. I mean, it's not just current seasons and live, it's library seasons, library episodes, library movies, web content, semi-professional web content. And in all of that, to kind of Rob's point, the other piece we see is that while the other devices, whatever they might be, are becoming increasingly important, TV is still the only platform that has 88% reach. It's still the only platform that drives about 5 hours of viewing every day, right? Compared to 3 hours on all of the internet doing everything. But I think the combination of all these things is what's driving a lot of the new behaviors. I think you mentioned, whether that's snacking, you want to catching up on a show while you're between things, errands, or binge watching prior seasons, or even just catching up on your current season, or just increasing your discovery of shows. And so you're consuming a much bigger variety than you used to on the 1 to 2 or 3 networks you used to watch, and the few episodes you used to always make a date for in the week.
So, in this ever-evolving ecosystem, who benefits most? Is it the content creator? Is it the platform? Is it the programming service? Is it SVOD services? Or does everybody benefit in some way, shape, or form? What are your perspectives in terms of particularly there are a lot of people here who I'm sure, how many people in this room are content producers? Yeah, there's quite a number of people here. So from a content producer point of view, how is this a boon for content producers, this evolving digital ecosystem?
Well, I mean, I'd start where you and I were discussing before the panel. I'd start with the audience, because I think they are the chief beneficiary of this. There's so much good programming now. There's an expectation that it's going to, that's the level that we've now set. There are more outlets to produce it for. There's more diversity in terms of what it can be, in terms of the number of episodes, the format. It's a less rigid storytelling world, I would say, now than ever. And there's a huge, just burgeoning creative opportunity and creative output that's happening. So I think that for the audience, that's great. For the producers, that's also great for the same reasons. There are more opportunities to do more ambitious things. There's more expectation that it be good. So if you're good, that's good news. And then obviously it creates business opportunities to deliver that content to that audience. So I really think it is a win-win-win.
Okay. And from your perspective, Rob?
I think everyone's going to benefit that, from vendors like Ubiquity, from the encoding and delivery business, to consumers, and to the networks, because people are going to consume more content. They're doing that already. You see that. You see a study every week that comes out that consumers are, catching up with one service like Amazon or Netflix, and then getting right into the season, catching up, at Comcast. So I think it's a boon to everyone, and we see that in our numbers. Just the consumption for, say, a typical movie on a set-top box, and sort of take the same number of people and then compare that to the same number of subscribers at one of the other services, you see a lot more consumption on those other services, because people are finding it easier to navigate, find what they want to watch when they want to watch it, so they watch more of it.
Okay.
Yeah, what strikes me is the multiplicity of business models that have now emerged, and that have each kind of reached, I think, critical scale. Because with the evolution of these business models, I think it helps each of the players in the ecosystem that you were talking about. I mean, we've got subscription services that seem to work well for certain categories of content,
Like what?
channels or live, or certain kind of library VOD services. EST, that I feel is growing rapidly. We launched a new EST service, and it's been doing extremely well for us. I think we've broken some records with sales of movies like Despicable Me 2 and the Lego Movie. You kind of see ad-supported models, I think, growing. I mean, video advertising as a category of internet advertising is I think the fastest growing category amongst web advertising, and that is supporting a whole new genre of content. And then you add to that the rental model, which has existed for a while, and it's given distributors, producers, programmers the ability to experiment with so many different things for different categories and different segments of customers, and actually appeal to each of these segments for very, very different use cases.
Okay. So what are people renting typically? What are the genres that people are renting?
People are still renting a lot of new release movies,
Okay.
for example.
Okay. So, and then on the EST side, though, it's been more movies, or is it more television shows that people are buying?
It's been a bit of both. I think
Okay.
we've been focused more on movies in the near
Okay.
term, but we're adding more to our television catalog.
Okay, well, we want to focus on, we talked about the audience is really important, so we want to focus on you, the audience here, and a lot of you, again, being content producers. Would love to ask each one of our panelists here right now what advice they would like to provide to content producers out here in terms of how they see their need to, or how they should be potentially navigating this world, and how they can benefit from new distribution outlets that are arising for them. Adam just talked about how there's so many outlets right now, but a lot of you are going to go back to your homes or back to your offices and are going to be trying to figure out what you're going to do next. So perhaps we can get some advice here from these panelists.
Well, maybe I'll frame it in an example. So these guys probably owe me some kind of royalty for how many times I've talked about their show. I was a huge fan of it. I just found it somewhat accidentally. It's a show that was on Vimeo, which is, I would say, up until this point, has been kind of a utility platform for makers. It's kind of a prosumer and professional platform for screening things more than anything else. It's like a very good version of YouTube, I guess. These guys produced a web series called High Maintenance. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but the central idea of it is it's a bicycle messenger pot dealer in Williamsburg, which sounds a little bit like a punchline, but it's so well done in every way. It's well conceived. The story world they live in is very real feeling, but it's very funny, it's very poignant. The stories end up being much more about, they're vignette because it's webisodic, they're much more about his customers than about him. He just kind of is a through line throughout the series. So they did this, I think, entirely independently. They put it up, they got some traction, they got the sort of chattering class found out about this show and commented on it. I think there was a piece in the New Yorker. Vimeo has now decided this is going to be their first investment in original programming, and they're commissioning another 6, and I believe they're doing it on a transactional, I think it's a transactional VOD model. I think they're going to offer consumers a chance to pay for just that series. I think that's a really interesting example for makers, because these people made something that was good. It had a unique voice. It was strong. It was not expensive to produce, and I'm sure they're getting a ton of attention from a whole bunch of different parts of the industry. I would imagine that there's a whole talent agency community looking very closely at them. If they're actually, I think they already have representation, but I think that's a really interesting model because it was a good piece of work that found an audience and then found a business model and found probably much more to come.
Okay, that's great. Rob, any thoughts?
So it's kind of stating the obvious, but target younger demos, skew younger. I mean, I think everyone does that anyhow to chase ratings and Nielsen's. But I think for a different reason now, which is all these new devices skew younger, and the consumption patterns on a service like Netflix. I've seen some statistics recently that really surprised me. People from 18 to 34 self-identified over 50% as subscribing to Netflix. Now, they may not subscribe, but their parents may subscribe. But Netflix skews really young, and there's lots and lots of consumption going on there. And then if you look at platforms like Xbox or PlayStation, which have built-in audiences of 25 to 30 million customers, that you can kind of game the system a little bit because it's not cluttered or crowded. So if you're going to go launch a show, you can really target a younger demo on those kind of devices and have a much higher chance of success because you just won't get lost in the clutter like you do with a linear television network.
Okay. And Himesh?
I'd say the advice I have to kind of Rob and Adam's point, a lot of this content in these new platforms is skewing younger and is skewing towards millennials. And there seems to be, for whatever reason, not as much of it being produced in traditional TV. So that would be one thought. The second thought is, people think about Comcast, they think about a linear TV channel and distribution for a linear TV channel. And as you're thinking about producing new categories of content, I'd love for you to think about us as broader than that. I mean, we've got digital platforms like VOD that gets several hundred million views a month, a web platform that has 20, 25 million uniques a month, a new application platform on our X1 where we can bring in third-party apps. And all these are avenues for us to broaden the scope of content that we can offer through our platforms in the living room.
Yeah, will you be looking to do original programming on that platform as well? I mean, DirecTV has done that to some extent. I was just sort of curious if that's something you would look at doing.
Yeah, we have this whole pretty large, pretty successful sister company called NBC that does that really well. So I think we're going to lean on them.
Okay, but everybody's saying something very interesting about the younger audience, and certainly we're seeing this whole mad rush for MCNs right now. Disney just spent a minimum $500 million for makers. It could go up to $950. Headline yesterday, $2.2 billion that Time Warner is rumored to be looking at spending on Vice. We have a situation where, I know the full screen folks are exploring different options. They're looking at building an SVOD service, et cetera. Peter Chernin has just announced that he's going to do a direct-to-consumer platform targeted at millennials. Do you think what content is going to have to change in significant ways to cater to this audience. You know, is the current ecosystem not servicing them effectively enough so that they are going to things like Makers, which is definitely not your traditional type of content. I mean, it's definitely more down and dirty. So what are your thoughts there?
Well, I don't know if the current ecosystem isn't serving them because there's a big ecosystem
Right.
and it's very, there's a huge range to
Right.
it. And also the audience, you know, the audiences are not a static idea. You know, this current audience is responding to something specific that they're not getting from linear television or
Right.
traditional media, and they're finding it in places like YouTube with the MCNs. Those will need to evolve from a business standpoint because they won't be able to sustain themselves as they are now.
Right.
So I don't know that the audience isn't getting what they need. I think the audience is finding a way, and makers are finding a way to reach that audience.
Right.
Whether they can sustain it is the question. And then obviously, this demographic bubble will continue to move,
Right.
and their habits will change.
Right.
And I'm not sure that short-form video watched on your phone will always be what they're looking for. I think that they'll have families like everybody has, and they'll sit at home and they'll watch TV,
Right.
or something like TV.
Yeah. Okay. Rob, what are your thoughts?
You know, there's always going to be a market for inexpensive, I think, content on these platforms that kind of matches the audience, and then really good programming costs a lot of money,
Right.
and you're going to have the resources to support that, either through advertising or license fees. I think the people who have failed have tried to mix and match, and it
Right.
just it didn't work.
Okay.
Yeah, I think of it as one important element of a broad video offering, right? It's as audiences change, as viewership changes, I think we all have to reinvent ourselves and all have to kind of serve these new emerging segments. And I agree. I think the millennial segment is one that we are probably underserving. And I don't think it's just content. It's the way we distribute our platforms, making it. There's an expectation, I think, in that demographic of having a UX that looks like that, because that's what like the X1. That's what
Right.
That's what the segment has grown up with, and they just don't understand the constraints of a legacy set-top box. I think there are technology issues. I think there are channel issues. I think there are content issues as well. I think we've got to address them all.
Okay, so this is going to lead to the next question, which is about the future of television, and I think we'll have a robust discussion on that. And then after that, what we want to do is open it up to questions from the audience so that you can all benefit from the panelists here and get some insights from them directly. So TV, 10 years from now, what do you think it is?
Well, I think it's on demand. I think that it looks something like what we just saw in terms of it's an interactive interface. I'm a believer in long-form storytelling. So I think there's what we've seen in the emergence of digital video in a significant way is that there's also another kind of storytelling which has a range of production values and a range of storytelling tactics and works in another way. But I think that there is this consistent and I think persistent value in telling something in formats that have enough time to play out for audiences. So I don't think that's going away. Whether it needs to be 22 minutes or 43 minutes or whatever, that I think can easily change as advertising models change, as people's expectations change. But I don't think that if you say what television is some kind of immersive storytelling experience that is longer than 3 or 5 minutes, I think that will still be around.
Okay. And do you think that channels will still play an important role in that, or will it become more, channels become apps?
I don't think there's a material difference between those two.
Okay.
I think that is there a brand that brings you a certain kind of experience that you can rely upon, say like, I go to them for this, that has value. I don't know whether it will stay the way that it is today, whether there will be a programmer with a sort of a curatorial business, but I would expect that there would be, because I think that it's very hard to navigate the big undifferentiated 99-cent download. I think it's hard.
Right.
And I'd rather have somebody define an experience for me, and and I may be an old school viewer in this way, but if I go to HBO, I expect something. If I go to FX, I expect something different.
Right.
That I think still has value and will help people as the fragmentation of the delivery continues, and as the range of programming choices proliferates.
Okay. Rob?
I think it's going to be world of apps. I think that, you know, it's going to be connected to a TV set, still going to be your big screen. That's where people want to watch the majority of their content. But I think it's going to be brand app driven. So, you know, people I think on average watch 11 networks. So you'll pick your 11 apps, and when you turn on your TV set, your 11 apps are going to come up, and you're going to be able to click on one of them, and then you're going to watch the linear feed if you want, or you can go watch, you know, what you've put into your queue, or what's being recommended to you. So it's going to really help you navigate, and it's going to be very personalized for you. And either the networks are going to do that, and they're going to do a great job with that and be very creative and do what they do best. Maybe integrating social features into that, true social features, something like we're doing, which is allowing people to watch movies with up to 5 friends, invite them in, watch the movie, and chat during the movie. Something that millennials love to do. They don't want to do any one thing at one time. Or it might be through Comcast Xfinity might, you know, enable that to happen also, where they basically let you pick your 11 channels that come up. They have the content, and again, it kind of hides everything else for you.
Okay, does that mean then a lot of channels wind up disappearing if you only have 11 on your set-top box or
I think
your
it'll
screen?
skew. I think you'll watch more and more of the ones that you pick, unless there'll be a little less discovery.
So you see more of an a la carte environment 10 years
I don't
down
think it'll
the
be.
road?
I don't think it'll ever be a la carte. I don't think it'll be a la
Okay.
carte for a while.
Okay.
But I think that you will do that as a consumer and pick the ones you want.
Now, do you think certain content producers who are known for producing certain content, okay, that they have an opportunity to become an app in this kind of world, or a program service themselves?
I think they do. I think you start to see that now. If anyone here has like a Roku box, you turn it on, and there's like 200 channels there, and you know there's some very interesting content there. There's like a yoga fitness channel there, which has a lot of good fitness content you can't find anywhere on TV now, and it's a nice little subscription service. I think there's Crunchyroll has done a good job. I think there's a bunch of those out there.
Yeah. Do many of you know what Crunchyroll is? Or aware of Crunchyroll? It's a subscription anime service that actually the Chernin Group made. They actually acquired it, and Peter Chernan's going to be actually contributing it to his over-the-top platform that he's going to be doing with AT&T. Himesh?
I'd say that the TV of the future really thinks about solving for an individual's end-to-end video experience, right? It's the entire user experience, and there's some content that I want to watch live, right? Tennis, sports. I mean, I want to watch it live. I want to be prompted. I want to know when it's happening. I want to be able to make a reservation to watch it. There is content that I'm not going to know about that I want to be able to discover serendipitously while I'm kind of browsing a guide that's easier to see, or get a recommendation from a friend like Rob was just telling me about. And when I get that recommendation, I want to be able to catch up rather than kind of start midway through the episode. I want to be able to lean on third-party ratings. I want to be able to have a deeper experience with the few characters, series, channels that I feel a personal affinity to, whether that's being able to discover additional interviews or kind of go behind the scenes, but selectively kind of increase my engagement with that kind of content. And ultimately, I want to be able to count on the fact that the most important video, the most relevant video, the one that the video that I will most likely want to consume, is being brought conveniently to one place to me.
And do you think there's any indications of this actually happening today in terms of our own ecosystem? Or do you feel that StreamPix is part of that solution today, or it's getting closer to it?
Yeah, that seems like I have to say yes to that.
Okay,
Right? There is no other right
I figure.
answer.
Okay.
No, I think we're making steps in the right direction. So let me just point out a few of the features, right? So on our X1 platform, the last button brings up the last 9 things you saw, as opposed to just take you back to the last linear channel. It takes you, it gives you a selection from the last DVR asset you saw, the last VOD asset you saw, the last linear network you saw, the last movie you purchased, whatever. And we know, as Rob mentioned, that typical consumers at a given point in time cut across a narrower set of content choices, call it 10, 12, 15, 20, whatever. And this gives them really easy access to that. Talking about the guide, right? Historically, there's been one way of guiding or navigating through your content. It's this long list of 300 plus channels across time slots. We've developed several new kind of guide instantiations, right? With one click, you can find yourself in a guide that only gives you kids programming. And you can customize that kids programming by age group that's run by Common Sense Media. Or with another click, you can go to a guide that just tells you what's happening in sports, or another guide that gives you what's happening in movies. So again, I think it becomes genre specific. It kind of puts the power back in the hands of the consumer. Think about future-proofing. I mean, if folks have worked in cable or have been involved with cable companies in the past, if you had to update a set-top box with a new feature, or just change the color of something on the menu, you had to plan for weeks and months, right? Because it was all embedded, there were all these different boxes. I think we pushed out like 4,000 updates to the X1 platform last year. And that allows you to future-proof it, keep it up to date with new technology, with new features. We've integrated Twitter, so that when you're navigating, you get the little Twitter bird that tells you that this particular show is trending. And that's what's happening on the screen. And then when you can start taking your TV to other screens, right? You can get your full channel lineup on an app on your tablet inside the home, or you get a selection of content through TV Everywhere, or content that you can stream live through TV Everywhere when you're outside the home. I think those are all steps in a pretty powerful new direction.
Okay. So what we'd like to do now, there's so many interesting things happening in this world, and I know you all have a lot of questions. So we'd like to open it up to the audience for questions and comments. Nobody has questions? I can come up with more. So, how many of you are, I'll ask some questions of the audience now, maybe we can provoke some conversation there. Oh, go ahead, we got a question.
Hello. I guess one of my questions is, you know, when you're here and you're pitching a show, and the question is always, what's your demographic? And I wonder if it's not a psychographic, or what data are we borrowing from the social streams or not? Like, I'm just wondering about that specific question,
Yep.
the demographic versus a psychographic.
You have any thoughts on that, in terms of how you think about creating programming?
Well, yeah, I think it's, I don't know, from my perspective, I think it's a question more for the buyer than for the seller. Maybe the buyer expects you to know that. I would think when I would hear an idea, I would say, I think I can see who this would appeal to. And then I think about shows that really do cut across what I think you would expect an audience, the typical audience demographic would be. You know, you think about the CW, which was, you know, probably meant to appeal primarily to, at least, you know, for a long time, to women 18 to 34. My wife's not 34, you know, and she watches it all the time. I do think that as shows generate buzz, I think that they tend to cut across typical demographics. I don't have a lot to say to that.
Okay, but you know, your question provoked a thought that I was having, particularly listening to Mesh talk about all the data that they're collecting. You know, is there an opportunity for content producers ultimately to be looking to partner more with platforms like yourselves more in terms of thinking about, like, this is, because you have so much data. You know what people are consuming, what they like, what they don't like, and you know what demographics are interested in certain types of programming and others in other types of programming. Are there opportunities for content producers to have some sort of collaboration with platforms to help them think through these things?
Potentially. I think our first obligation as it relates to data is to our consumers
Yeah.
and their expectation of privacy. You know, we have users who have opted in that have allowed us to, for example, market certain products to them. I mean, we know they don't have HBO, and we can upsell HBO. But kind of the deeper level of behavioral targeting that you're suggesting, we have not done yet, and I think we'll venture into it very cautiously.
Yeah, okay, okay. Other questions? Yes?
Himish, are you partnering or talking to a Canadian broadcast distribution undertaking around your X1 platform? Are you aware of anything? TELUS, Rogers, Bell, anything that's going on similar to what you're doing?
We're very focused right now in rolling out X1 to our current customer base, kind of really trying to do it as fast as we can. It's going well. I think we're shipping over 20,000 boxes a day these days. We have also announced, I think earlier this year, a partnership with Cox to kind of explore X1 to their base. And so clearly one can expect that you know, we're interested in proliferating the platform. We feel it's good for consumers, but it's hard, and we have our hands full rolling it out to our own subscribers right now.
I was interested in your comment about millennials. I don't feel that they services. Can you elaborate a bit more about that?
So, you know, when I look at that top down, the percentage of cord cutters, shavers, kind of less TV viewers happen to be in the millennial segment, right? That's one data point. The second is that seems to be the primary audience that is driving viewership of web-based platforms. So that's Vimeo, YouTube, and others. You know, so I kind of put that together, and I kind of say maybe we should be doing more for millennials on the TV set. You know, I don't see that as a stand on the viability or the necessity of TV, because we still get a huge amount of usage, and people tend, you know, one could argue people tend to get older, get TV, you know, for families, and you kind of have the viewership in that segment. But I think in that particular age group, I wonder if we have an opportunity to bring more of that content into the TV set. There's a certain kind of expectation of quality that kind of provides. Plus the TV now is inherently multi-platform, as I talked about. And will that increase the incidence of millennials on our platform?
One thing we didn't fully talk about, and how many more minutes do we have? We have two more minutes. One thing that we didn't talk about, you know, there's all these platforms. Do you think there are issues financing the amount of content that needs to be produced, or the amount of content that is being delivered on these platforms? Are people having issues from a financing point of view and putting all that together? Because, you know, to make it all work, to make it all make sense at the end of the day, I mean, certainly MCNs don't deliver a big bang to the buck to the producers, but getting a television series done and moving through, how should people be thinking about financing projects?
Well, I think there is a need to be more creative about that. to bring in financing from more sources, to think about windows differently, to think about platforms differently, because I think as Rob was saying, high production value programming is expensive or has been expensive, and finding ways to pay for it is challenging. But I think if you can find enough partners that have a similar audience that they're trying to deliver, that can monetize the content effectively at the price point that they need to contribute to get the thing made, that equation can work. It maybe is more complex than it used to be.
Right.
It involves more players at the table than there used to be. But I think there are enough outlets in enough places that service similar audiences that you can find ways to do it. I think you do need to work harder.
Right. So producers have to be much more aware of all the various platforms, not only within their own countries, but also on a global basis, because there are lots of opportunities to be doing things across markets as well. Okay. Okay, well, I think we've had an interesting conversation here. I'd like to thank all the panelists. Does anybody else have any more questions before we say goodbye? Okay, go ahead.
Diversion going on, where does theatrical sit 5 years from now in comparison? People still go to movies and line up and watch them without being able to select anything?
I think the studio business has always been about windowing. The majority of the viewership, 30, 40 years ago was in the theaters, and then, there was a little less theaters, but actually the theaters kind of held their own, and then you had VOD, and then you had EST, and, I think, and then you have subscription now also. I think it's a very, very healthy business, but I do think the theatrical business is getting tougher. You can see it. It's about big movies get most of the screens. And they're going for younger audiences because they're a dependable audience who go to the movies. So it has become formulaic. But I think that opportunity for independent filmmakers, surprisingly, there are screens for them now, and there's more money being spent on those movies across all these devices and all these platforms dramatically. I was at Sundance Channel. I left there 6 or 7 years ago, and the money that we were paying to license movies that couldn't get distribution anywhere for some really great content, it's probably tenfold the price right now.
Wow.
Which is really surprising.
Wow.
So, and it's because there's demand, from places like Snag Films and Netflix and Amazon for content.
Okay. Well, we wish you all well with all of your content endeavors, and hope this was helpful in helping you navigate your own futures. Thank you.